Welcome back to another episode of the Overwatch Champion Series Partner Team Evaluations. Today I'm wrapping up the regular season and giving my honest opinions on how every single partner team performed in Stage 3. If you are watching this series for the first time, just let it be known that I believe that the OWCS partner teams, all 9 of them, should be under a larger microscope and or should be under more scrutiny and criticism compared to the other OWCS participants. At least to a small extent, they're getting some type of assistance from Blizzard. They're the ones with the in-game cosmetics. They're the ones being talked about the most. They're the ones under the biggest spotlight, and therefore should be reviewed for their performance, good or bad. And let me tell you, we've got a good mix of good and bad to discuss in this video, so without wasting any more time, let's dive straight into this. Let's start off in Korea, seeing as they have the most partner teams out of any region, and I want to begin with Zeta Division. They're a team that has been pissing me off for a long time this season, so I want to get them out of the way quickly so I don't have to think about them until the offseason. I sound like a broken record at this point, but Zeta are unbelievably frustrating to watch, and Stage 3 was yet another example. There's ups and downs, but they have an okay record in the Stage 3 qualifiers. They go 5-3, they're top 4, they're right where they need to be. They've just got to hang on and play well when it matters, but if you've been keeping up with Zeta Division, you know that is practically an impossible task. And what's so incredibly infuriating about watching this team is, just like any other stage throughout the last 2 years, there were moments in Stage 3 where they did give their fans hope. It was off to a rough start at like the very beginning of the stage, but then they had a good win over Falcons, the literal defending stage champs. They beat them in convincing fashion. Their new signing Mag looked fantastic on the wrecking ball. Seems like a great turning point. You can use this momentum to your advantage just for them to do nothing else for the entirety of Stage 3 and beyond. I just can't get over how they drag you in just to rip your heart out over and over again. They started Stage 3 4-0, ladies and gentlemen. Want to know how many more games they won from mid-September until the present when their season ended? 2 games. They even had yet another opportunity to knock out Falcons and have maybe a slight chance of going to Stockholm. They had to beat them in one single elimination game in the Road to World Finals, and they flopped. It was a super winnable game where Falcons weren't even playing that well, and they still could not take advantage. It is the same old script with this Zeta team, where they are constantly getting little broed by Falcons. Maybe it's just me, but I wouldn't even say that any one particular player was super terrible, like noticeably bad. This just felt like a team issue. The players felt lost, the coaching felt lost, they could not do anything right, and that's pretty crazy. That's not what I was expecting. I wasn't a big fan of the Mag signing, it was just whatever for me, but he genuinely was a decent contributor on the team. I'd argue one of the better ones. Bliss didn't do half bad in the main support role either. It just felt like the team as a whole did not know what they were doing. They were being led astray. It's annoying, man. They've got to blow this thing up. It's clearly not working. Maybe try building around Bernard and alphaYi. I feel like those are the only players that are even worth building around at this point, but maybe that's even too much to ask for. This just felt like a despondent team through and through in Stage 3. This team's gone through plenty of adversity, but I can say with absolute confidence this was the worst Zeta has ever looked, and it's really not all that close either. I feel absolutely no guilt in my heart whatsoever giving this team a D- for their Stage 3 performance. You could argue that it should be an F, and maybe I'm being a little too kind, but just because they got that one fluke win over Falcons, I'll give them the D- instead of an F. Not that it makes any real difference. Alright, rant over, let's talk about some real teams, starting with T1. My only real way to describe T1 Stage 3 and end to the regular season is meh. They weren't bad, but they didn't do much to really stand out either. It felt a lot like Stage 2 if I'm being completely honest with you. Not much change at all. They're still solid, they're still one of the best teams in the world, but we said the same thing last stage. We know they belong at this point. It's about what you can do next. It's a what have you done for me lately type of esport, and the answer for T1 is not much. I witnessed no remarkable progress, a mirror image to Stage 2. I saw a team that has promise, but overall felt stagnant. A team that is respectable, but you don't necessarily trust to get it done when the lights are at their brightest. They aren't quite rival worthy yet. They're not at the level of the Titans of Overwatch Champion Series quite yet. And while that is sad, while they are close to being World Championship worthy, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing for a young team in their first year together as a core to have some shortcomings and to already be this good. This team has already progressed a lot over time, and Stage 3 was another example of how they've actually been able to establish a consistent team. They only lost one game in the qualifier, and overall they're only struggling against the best of the best. And again, I must reiterate, for a year one program, that's not a bad place to be at all. They're already much closer than a lot of teams could even dream of. Their players, if they can just do a little bit more, they're right there. Like Donghack and Proud, for example. I've been praising those guys all season, and rightfully so, because they've been great. They've been stars over in Korea. And you have Zest, who has come back to life, looking more like his prime from a couple of years ago. This T1 team has a nice core, and the meta is in a good place for them right now to really make some noise, maybe heading into the playoffs. I think T1 are in a good spot, but looking at how they did in Stage 3, it was pretty average. I think that they deserve a C grade because of that. When you think of C, you think of you're just getting by, you're doing average. You didn't do much to improve, but you didn't do anything that makes you think you got worse either. This can feel a little misleading because I don't think T1 were bad by any stretch. Let me make that abundantly clear. But because they didn't progress enough, I just think of it as okay. Maybe they can get me to change my mind in the World Finals, and I'll be eagerly watching to see if they can finally prove me wrong. Up next is Team Falcons, and man, are these guys as head-scratching as ever. I could not get a read on these guys for so long. They love to stress out their fans until the very last moment for whatever reason. I thought for sure they were going to ride the high of Stage 2 when they won the midseason championship and came back to life after looking terrible. I thought this is where they take over Korea and they stay as the #1 team. They lock in playoff form, but that was not the case at all. They actually had a really slow start, a lot of ups and downs. The Zeta Division, as mentioned earlier, they got blown out by Crazy Raccoon when Lip wasn't even playing. And even when you got to the Korea playoffs, I mean, they lost in the first round. They didn't even lose to Crazy Raccoon this time. They lost to Wei, and that game wasn't that close. So now in the Road to World Finals, you have to go through the play-ins, where one loss could mean the end of your season, and you almost lose to Onside Gaming of all teams. It took them 5 maps to take care of those guys. So you'd think with how they're performing, there's a good chance they could actually miss out on playoff qualification, right? Well, as it turns out, this team enjoys pushing the term sandbagging to new limits, because in the face of their rivals, Crazy Raccoon, in the first round, they beat them in one of the best matches they have ever played up until this point in their history. A masterclass game by Proper and Merit, looking like their mid-season championship form all over again, and they were so great with their ability with the bans. They bait Crazy Raccoon by deferring their ban over to them on King's Row, just to make sure that they get rid of the Ram, so then they can break out the surprise Rhine, and because Max is in the game and his hero pool is limited, he can't really play anything that counters the Rhine. It was just so well played by Falcons, so well executed, and they rode that high all the way to the grand finals where they'd once again play against Crazy Raccoon. And at one point, they had a 3-1 lead in that series. They damn near beat their rivals twice on the way to getting first place and the top seed out of Korea. It's as if they like playing under the pressure, like it makes them play better, like it means something more to them. I don't know why they can't play that way all the time, but hey, whatever works for you, right? This team is more than capable of going all the way still, and they have to be taken seriously. Proper has been playing amazing throughout this entire stage. He is in championship form, he's hungry to win another ring, and Merit, even though he's not quite the same player as Stalker, has been amazing for Falcons in a lot of matches throughout this season. And on top of it all, it feels like someone and Hanbin are finally playing in harmony, and they both have roles without really overstepping any boundaries. Falcons feel like they have found balance to their team, and I am a big fan of them heading into the playoffs. They're in a good spot, even if they did lose that finals to Crazy Raccoon. I think overall, knowing how they ended the stage, you've got to give them a pretty decent grade. They played well against their rivals, and at this point, that's kind of all that matters to them. So I'm going to give them a B+ for Stage 3. They don't quite make it into the A range just because there were some rough moments, and that's got to count for something, but overall, still a great stage for them. They showed me the consistency I've been craving for a long time, so good on them. And lastly is Crazy Raccoon, and as per usual, they were very consistent. They've easily been the most winningest and consistent franchise in OWCS history thus far, and Stage 3 was simply more of the same. They got the top seed in Stage 3, they had one loss to their names, they got first place in the Korea Stage 3 tournament, and first place in the Korea Road to World Finals tournament as they secure the number 1 seed heading into the playoffs, where they try and take care of some unfinished business. And in general, even though things didn't change that much, I am proud of Crazy Raccoon for showing some adaptations through certain situations, changing up their strategy, and most importantly, staying true to themselves as well. They had to go without one of their leaders in Lip for several weeks, and they were just fine without him. There was a meta change, and it seems to benefit their style of play a lot. There was a new hero that came into the equation, and Chorong has picked him up quite well. In general, while not too much has changed, I think it is worth noting that this team showed a good ability to stay prepared for the unexpected, something that's gotten them in trouble in the last couple of stages where they've fallen short of their goals. That simply was not an issue this stage for the most part. They were ready for most things. Even when Falcons got them in that one game in the upper bracket finals, they made sure to get them back the next day after learning what they did wrong. Even though they did go down 3-1 in that series, they continued to believe in themselves. They didn't get too down on themselves. They stuck to their strategy, and they stuck to what works. They didn't try to get cute with it. They let Lip just cook on Sojourn. They didn't bother with the Freyamir or Cass where Merit seemed to be cooking. They just let Lip do his thing, and it worked to perfection. I'm happy that Crazy Raccoon could navigate through some difficult times and potential adversity without really batting an eye. That was good to see out of them, but unfortunately Stage 3 is nothing but a precursor of what really matters for them. It's all about actually getting it done this year at Stockholm, making up for the shortcomings of last year. That's what this entire season is built up for them. They've accomplished literally everything else, and they know this could be their last ride together, so they've got to make this count, and it's good to see that they're taking the preparation and practice as seriously as humanly possible with how they performed in Stage 3. Was this out of the ordinary in terms of Crazy Raccoon and the standards they set for themselves? I wouldn't say so necessarily, but there are positive takeaways like I discussed, and it always helps to beat Falcons in such a big game like how they did. So I think that Crazy Raccoon deserve about an A- grade. I think that's fair. Nothing insane, but with what they accomplished, they've got to be somewhere in the A range. On to North America, we've only got 2 teams to discuss here, and both of which did pretty dang well for themselves. Starting off with the NA Stage 3 champions, Team Liquid. Before this season even began, Liquid were seen as one of the highest potential rosters in all of OWCS. There is reason to believe with the level of talent and the coaching at their disposal that they could run the table in North America. And it took them a long time to get to that point. There were many moments throughout this year where we were questioning if they could ever get first place. And finally, after several months of ups and downs and choked games and players maybe not holding themselves accountable enough, they got it done. They got their first place that's been eluding them for so long. They're NA champions with the top seed heading into Stockholm, Sweden. They have all the momentum in the world, and I think now that they finally got that big win, that the sky could be the limit. It felt like this was a severe mental block that had been keeping them for greatness for so long. But once you get that big win, once you're done being accustomed to losing, that can change everything from your perspective to how you perform under pressure. Think about where they are now compared to the beginning of the season when they were letdowns, when they're choking under pressure, when their synergy wasn't where it needed to be, when the roster wasn't fully complete, when they had flexibility issues. They got 3rd place in Stage 1. Stage 2, they get a little bit better, but they choke against GK. They dig themselves a hole early, and that was a theme that followed them in a lot of games in Stage 2, even against Crazy Raccoon. And then that leads us to Stage 3, where finally they put it all together. They have the right roster in place. The meta's in a good place for them, and when they're playing the top level competition, they're not getting off to slow starts against them. They're tight series, they're not totally dominating, yeah, but they're finally being clutch. They're having that clutch gene in the big moments, something that was severely lacking throughout this entire season that consistently kept them from greatness. They showed it time after time in Stage 3. They won several games that went to either a map 5 or a map 7. For once, it finally felt like they were a step ahead of everyone rather than a step behind, not having to forge these crazy comebacks just for it to be too little too late. They were keeping it evenly matched against SSG and GK, and we saw the results, between them being adept at this current meta, the stars playing up to their potential, and generally being more flexible than these other teams. They're able to have a consistent advantage. This team is starting to feel post-season ready. There's a level of preparation that was simply lacking before. They seem so much more ready for the unexpected these days. And a lot of credit goes to the players for stepping up big time. Infected looks like one of the most versatile tank players in the entire world right now, be it on Ball or Winston, or going over to Sigma to counter what GK were trying to do with the Wrecking Ball. This dude seemed like a great answer to so many problems. Then your other young prospect in Tree, he was realizing his true potential as well. In a lot of those big tournament games, he was one of the most consistent contributors. And when you combine him with Zera and RuPaul and Vega, who are back in Toronto Defiant form, you have a recipe for success. I could not be more proud of this Liquid team and what they accomplished. This was such a great stage in almost every facet. They get an emphatic A. But don't get it wrong, they were not the only star performers of North America in Stage 3, because Spacestation Gaming also had a fantastic return to form. After the pathetic level of gameplay we witnessed in Stage 2, this team seemed like they were dead in the water. But thankfully for SSG fans worldwide, they decided that it was time to make some change. They didn't sit on their butts and do nothing. They did what was needed to regain relevance, and man, did they do a good job with that. And credit goes where it's due, because no matter if your team needs a change desperately or not, it's always going to be a risk to overhaul your roster like that. We're talking a new coach, new tank, new main support, and new hitscan player. That's a lot of new pieces that you have to account for, and they all fit into place perfectly. Coach Christopher has given this team a good sense of direction, while the tank position has completely transformed into one of the best in the entire league, even though Kellen wasn't even that bad, but Hawk has genuinely been that good, and I'm surprised. It's not that he was a bad option, but he had temporarily retired, and it seemed like his love for the game was dying out, but he came back with a vengeance, and has looked the best he has in, I would argue, 4 years, since prime Atlanta Reign form. Between the insane mechanics and the in-game comms, he's been a great leader that was well needed compared to the previous stages. Lep continued to be pretty consistent as one of the best main support options in North America, and Chronic seemed to evolve his game even further. He did not bat an eye under the pressure of being on a partner team that has such high aspirations. He continued to look and feel like maybe the best hit scan in all of the region. And whatever this new team is, it seemed to have enabled Sugar Free and CJ in the best ways. Sugar Free, Lenny's gonna do Lenny things, we're used to it by now, but the story has been CJ. He has been right up there with Ultraviolet and RuPaul in terms of his level of play. Genuinely right in the conversation as maybe the best flex support in North America in Stage 3. He was phenomenal. He elevated his game so much. And all these positives just seemed to mesh together into a well-oiled machine that was competitive throughout this entire stage, win or loss. There was not a single game throughout the entire stage that they had no chance of winning. A drastic opposite compared to Stage 2. And when you factor in that every game against GK and Liquid went the distance, win or loss, it just feels like such a big note of improvement overall for this team in like any way you can think of. They beat GK multiple times, and they damn near beat Liquid in that grand final. Had Hawk gotten that remake, if he was able to get Bomb at 99%, if he'd gotten that extra percent and he was able to remake, there's a chance they end up winning that last fight, and it's them that hoisted up the trophy. They were literally one singular fight away. SSG have never been more back. They're in such great shape, and it was such a great turnaround compared to last stage. There are a lot of net positives and not many negatives to take away for SSG. They feel like a completely different team in all of the best ways, and I am more than happy to give them an A- grade for their efforts. And had they beaten Team Liquid, it just might have been an A. And that leaves us with the EMEA region, where we have some good, some bad, and some amazing. Starting with the bad, and I can't even believe I'm saying this still, we got Virtus Pro. This was a team that was expected to be a lock for Stockholm. even if they didn't play great at times in Stage 2, we thought they were about to have a resurgent comeback in Stage 3. They just added Kevster to the team, the meta was turning to a place that was great for them, with lots of flex DPS options, with Tracer and Dive being viable, with Wu Yang just being really good for them. Ice also came in and gave this team a boost with the Zarya on the Wrecking Ball, things that Vestola just aren't that great on. VP were in a great spot, and their matches in the qualifiers were suggesting as much. But when it mattered the most, despite them having their best roster up to date, they flopped hard, and I mean very, very hard. You have a rematch against Twisted Minds, who you'd beat previously in the qualifiers, and this time you get creamed by them. You think it's no big deal, we'll just win throughout the lower bracket, there's no other scary teams that are left, just for them to lose in the very first round of the losers bracket to Gen.G and have their season very suddenly come to an end. Now, there's quite a few reasons as to why things went as poorly as they did. One of which, from a reliable source that I heard, is that they just simply weren't able to practice as much as they'd like to due to some facility issues, amongst other things. But also, they clearly were very unprepared to deal with a very specific hero that's been quite relevant in EMEA. Her name is Symmetra. The moment that Yubi and Twisted Minds broke her out, it's like some type of secret got unlocked. Like the secret cheat code to victory was found to beat VP no matter what. They had a very hard time combating that sim in her movement. Twisted Minds played a lot of rush where the Tracer and the Zarya just weren't getting as much value, the ball as well, and Gen.G kind of followed suit with their own playstyle, and that just led to Kevster having to swap off the Tracer, which made things more complicated, and they end up losing both series in very tragic fashion. After as well as they played all season as a firmly established, respectable team, winning Stage 1, making it to land in Stage 2, getting an upset against Weibo, they all have it come crashing down before they can even get to Stockholm. And the most wild part to me about this all is that VP managed to lose out on Stockholm in the exact same way as last year, in extra rounds on a map 5 on Rialto. Pain. That is the only thing I can use to describe this situation. Pain. Their best team on paper is the one that doesn't go to a LAN. Kevster also doesn't go to a single LAN the entire season. It is absolute madness what has transpired with Virtus Pro. So much hype just to be let down in the end. I'm giving VP a D+ for their Stage 3 grade. Who was surprisingly not that disappointing this stage was Gen.G of all teams. Gen.G in the first two stages were an atrocity. The whole Korean import experiment was a letdown, and they'd already abandoned it heading into Stage 3, so it seemed like they'd just stay at the floor, and I thought there was a good chance they may not even be top 4 in their own region anymore. So imagine my surprise when towards the end of the stage, after a rough start, they suddenly look a lot better with a completely different team than they ever did when they technically had more talent on paper in the first two stages of the year. It's not like they were playing lights out, but towards the end of the stage, they started to look mighty competitive, taking Twisted Minds to a map 5, almost going to a map 5 without Katsuya, literally the two best teams in the region, and they nearly beat both of them. It seemed like this team was very comfortable in this meta. They made something out of nothing. Tread was very comfortable with a lot of the tanks that were available. Exodio, he was the hero of the stage for these guys. He was unbelievable in that game against Virtus Pro. You had Backbone, who was like semi-retired back in action, back in his London Spitfire form, back on the May, back on the Reaper and the Symmetra. That seemed to work well for the team. He added some good leadership aspects. The backline, they were finally playing the right combination of players consistently, and that worked well. Gen.G felt the most hold they had the entire season, and all it took was making a team that actually made sense, at least a little bit. Go figure. They had some momentum heading into the stage playoffs, and when they beat Virtus Pro, it seemed like they were actually going to do it. After being garbage for more than 2/3 of the year, they were going to mess around and make Stockholm, Sweden. But of course, that would be way too simple. In their way was Team Peps, who they would tragically lose to in 3-0 fashion. I don't know if it would have made a difference or not. I'm assuming it at least would have been a better series, but exoDial sadly had those internet issues. There were moments where it was a 4-on-5. He had super high ping, and I think it just took the entire team out of it. Without their best player there, it broke everybody's spirit, and they lost that game. Under different circumstances, on a different day, where the Spanish internet isn't trash, maybe that game ends up being different, but that, of course, is a hypothetical. It's crazy they end up losing that series after beating Virtus.pro. It's like the most Gen.G thing ever, but regardless, this still was, by far and none, the best and most entertaining stage for Gen.G. The fans were actually able to have some type of excitement rather than just sitting there and watching their team be trashed game after game after game. They made upsets happen. They played well against good teams. I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. A completely different Gen.G team. It's very unfortunate with how it ended, but you gotta feel pretty proud to see some progression and not go out sad. They actually looked like a worthwhile team. I don't know if I'd say partner team level, but at least they were a competent Overwatch team for the first time that entire year. Progression is progression, no matter how you slice it. I'm going to give them a B- grade because, again, this was the best they've looked the entire year. They finally gave me something to work with without being miserable, so that's enough to at least get them in the B range. And finally, we wrap up the video with Twisted Minds, and in a similar sense to Team Liquid, they kind of followed the same path, where they finally get it done after a lot of ups and downs. Stage 1, they're a major letdown. They don't play nearly as well as they should have despite their roster, so they make some changes heading into Stage 2. They look a lot better, just to come up short in a crazy series against one of their rivals, and then in Stage 3, it finally all connects. It wasn't always pretty. They had another tough loss or two to alexyOWL amongst other teams, but when it came down to the stage playoffs, they locked in, and I think they found a proper identity. They understood that they couldn't compete with Virtus.pro's composition of playing the Tracer and doing that mirror, so they used their old style, and that worked really well. But instead of using KSA, they decided they're going to stick with TVNT, and his aggressive playstyle seemed to be a lot more well-suited for the meta. He did well in the game against VP, and alexyOWL as well, able to actually go head-to-head with Zeta and a lot of the time get the better of him, which is something we haven't been able to say a lot this season. Very dominant on the Zarya and on the Ram, D.Va as well. He was great throughout the entire tournament. Not to mention, as per usual, you just let courts cook and good things happen. Saw it against VP, but definitely a lot against alexyOWL in that grand finals where they won in dominant fashion. That dude literally could not be stopped, and it felt like he did not even give Lambda a chance to get comfortable in that game. Courts just doing courts things as usual, but it felt like Psycho and Yubi were good contributors too. Psycho for being amazing on the Tracer in a matchup against Checkmate, which is not easy, but then also him being unselfish and deciding it would be best for the team if he sat on the bench for the Virtus.pro game, and they go more towards the Symmetra style, which obviously more so suits Yubi. You gotta be very unselfish to sacrifice your own playtime like that for the better of the team. It was just a great veteran move from a guy who clearly could be a really good coach someday. They just did all the right things on their journey to get here. They faced a lot of heartbreak. They had a hard time finishing against alexyOWL. That was just the one team they could not beat over and over and over again, including the day before the grand finals. But then they finally got it done. And even in that loss, it seemed like they stuck to a really good approach. They had the right strategy to get by them with the Wu Yang, a little bit of Brig as well to try and counter the D.Va, not to mention some unconventional hero bans where they were banning very typical heroes being played by both sides to try and throw alexyOWL off their rhythm, and it worked on the second time they played them. They were very uncomfortable, and they got a super lopsided win. A dominant statement victory as you head towards Stockholm, Sweden. They finally took care of business against the one team that consistently beat them every single time in the meaningful match. This was so big for Twisted. They're in a very similar light to Liquid. The progression is there. They got the big win. They've got the momentum going into Stockholm, and their players look fantastic. And I am very, very excited to see what they do in an international LAN event yet again, because they always know how to make things spicy. But nonetheless, Twisted Minds absolutely get an A grade for their performance in Stage 3. Their best of the year without a doubt. And with that said, that is going to wrap up this video. Let me know what you think about the 9 partner teams and their performance in Stage 3 down in the comments below. And do be on the lookout, because while the regular season may be over, we still have a postseason to look out for, and when that does end, I likely will do a total season evaluation for all 9 franchises, so be on the lookout for that, and make sure to like the video and subscribe as always if you enjoyed. I've been ATP, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.